This is the Local Real Estate Developer Podcast, where we break down the mindset, strategies, and partners it takes to become a developer in your own backyard. I'm your host, Christy Candle, and I've spent my entire career in real estate development. I believe locals have the power to shape the future of their communities, and you don't need $1 million to do it.
And I'm Rafael Collazo, a commercial real estate broker and investor. Together, we're here to remove the gatekeeping and give you clarity and confidence to take your first steps into development, no matter where you're starting from.
Each week, we'll share the stories of local developers across the country, everyday people who saw a need in their town and said, why not me?
And we'll bring in the strategic partners who help make these projects real. Brokers, architects, engineers, lenders, contractors, so you can learn how to bring your vision to life.
This is about more than just making money. We are here to empower you to build a better future, one project, one street, one community at a time.
Welcome to the Local Real Estate Developers Podcast. I'm your co-host, Rafael Collazo, and I'm also here with my co-host, Christy. We're excited for a really good discussion today.
Yeah, I'm really excited today. We have Lynn Makela on. She is a co-founder of Local Real Estate Developers and one of my very good friends, and is working on several development projects up where she's at. So Lynn, how are you doing today?
It's an honor to be here with you both, and really excited to dive into the details and talk about how to make an impact in your local community.
Love it. Lynn, do you want to give us a little bit of backstory of what brought you back to the part of the world that you're now developing in? And then we'll get into some of your projects.
Yeah, sure thing. You'll have to cut me off if I go too long. Yeah, we started, my husband and I met at our university town up in Houghton, Michigan, which is a teeny tiny little spot up in northern Michigan. And we met there in college, got our degrees, pulled up our bootstraps, and we're like, all right, let's go figure out this corporate world thing that we just paid all this money for these degrees for. Chased our careers for a bit out west. We did about 5 years between Oregon and Seattle. And then we had a really cool opportunity. And at the same time, we're kind of getting tired of the hustle and bustle of the crazy commute that is traffic that is everywhere, but is very prevalent in cities, and realized that maybe as a soul searching opportunity, that was not where we wanted to be long term. And at the same time, that aligned perfectly with a great opportunity my husband was able to take to start a startup in our university town. So felt like going home a bit. And we landed back in the Keweenaw Peninsula in 2018, and he kind of dove headfirst into that startup world. And I kind of started to work remotely for a while, was trying to figure out what we were going to do, and then found myself working alone a lot and was like, wow, it would be really cool if we had a co-working space. And so the entrepreneurial gears started turning. I ended up finding an amazing partner whose father owned a building that was the perfect historic spot to put this really cool kind of fun space that people could come together in if they were working remotely. And mind you, this is like 2017, 2018. This is before remote working was de facto. So we were able to work together, partner to build out that space. And that kind of started a spark that led us fast and furiously to renovating a cabin, which kind of brought us to Airbnb, which brought us to buying a hospitality resort, or like a resort that is focused on a hospitality business management model, which we learned quickly, fiercely, all while doing our other jobs. How's that for a backstory, Christy?
I love it. I love that story every time I hear it. And I've heard it quite a few times, but what I love about the cabins, before we dive into your current development project, is maybe give us a little bit of a rundown of what that actually looked like, the condition it was in, how you got the loans, when it happened, and all the...
Yeah, you bet. So when we moved back, we had an opportunity. My husband really wanted to put all heart, soul, time, energy into this startup. And so we decided to save about enough money so that we could live here for a year in case the startup went belly up and was not successful. And we were really fortunate, and they did really great work. And there was not a concern ever. The business is still up and running and growing. So we had this pocket of money, and we found this little cabin, kind of fulfilling our dream of having a little cabin in the woods a little bit further north from us, where we landed in the Keweenaw Peninsula, but in an awesome location. And we spent about 2 years of weekends remodeling that. And that really got into our psyche as like, wow, this is something we really enjoy to do together. You're really handy. I like to design stuff. We both have really good vision for kind of making spaces come to life. And looking back at that design now, it feels so much part of a younger area of where we were in terms of what we felt comfortable in doing. But we did it. We overhauled almost every piece of that puzzle walls. We essentially like pulled everything back down to the studs in most cases, redid electrical, redid plumbing. And we kind of started to look around and say, okay, what is the next opportunity that we could look at? And 2 miles down the road, there was a very rundown set of cabins, a resort. And we felt that it had been on the market for 5 years already, and no one was looking at it because of its condition, or maybe they were looking at it, realized it was too much of a project for people to tackle. We're in a really remote part of the world. It's super rural. Closest Lowe's or Home Depot is 3 hours from that location. And so you're working with local businesses, which is great, local hardware stores, local construction companies to help figure things out. And we were silly enough to think that we could make it work on our own, but also wanted to partner. And originally our design for the cabins was to come in and transition a bunch of them, which we deemed to be at the moment really not something we wanted to salvage. If we were going to start this expanded hospitality or short-term rental business, we were thinking, okay, let's come in, let's move a few of these or take them down and put up new structures that we didn't have to worry about the things that had already been part of the problem for the last 50 or 60 years. So new plumbing, new utilities, new everything going to these spaces. But that was in 2019. And so as we were getting this plan together, we found this awesome partner that was going to come and build out a few of these model cabins for us. And as we were going to the bank with our plan, kind of just confirmed everything was a go, COVID shut the world down. And so we went back to the bank and said, hey, our partners are now delayed. They don't know what their timelines look like. It put us in this bit of a purgatory, but it did give us time to pivot. And so we were able to take some of the experience that we had in remodeling our first cabin, share that with our lender, who was still looking at us like we were crazy. Let's be honest. He thought we were nuts, and tell him that we thought we could make it work with essentially standing up this new resort by going in and putting in a lot of sweat equity and making some initial changes while we got some money rolling in, assuming the world was going to open back up. It was kind of that timeline when nobody really knew what they were doing. And so we got to that point. We got them to sign on the dotted line, began a month-long sprint of electrical and fixture updates and paint and cleaning. And we essentially opened in July 4th weekend of 2020. Not knowing what to expect, having no idea if this was going to be enough or what it was going to be like. And it ended up being a really great summer. I mean, we took it very slow and steady. We didn't open all the cabins. We did this very reduced approach. But in terms of the world and where the world was, they wanted to be not in their homes, and they didn't want to really be in a hotel where they're interacting with other people. We're still very, everyone's wearing masks. We're 6 feet away. Like, this is still a scary time in the history of everybody. And we were able to offer people a clean location with lots of space, plenty of room to move about, and a facility that everyone really enjoyed because they were right next to Lake Superior, had an awesome view of the water, could just kind of detox after the last few months of not knowing and all the uncertainty that was the beginning of the pandemic.
Great. Yeah. And questions about that, because, the original use of this property was that also kind of a resort that just had come down on hard times? And then maybe regarding that, was there any hurdles you had to jump through from the municipality side to get that project up and running again so that it could perform like it needs to in order for it to be a viable project?
Yeah, great questions. We did have I guess it was fortunate at the time where zoning was set up already for that to be a commercial. It's a non-conforming commercial space, I think is our designation.
Non-conforming use.
So
right?
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had that was retained. They were running the cabins, but they were slowly reducing the capacity that they were doing. So it was very minimal operation at the time. Even when we took their numbers to the bank, we had some hard conversations with our lender. We're like, no, we know we can do better. Look at what we're doing 2 miles down the road with our single, property. We had some of that we were able to bring and kind of bolster our approach. So it had been run. It was run by an older couple, and they were just ready to be done. They'd been trying to sell for 5 years. And again, I think the state of it was just that no one was willing to come up and take on that big of a project. The property is 27 acres. There's 13 buildings. There's now 10 cabins, but there was a lot of work that needed to be done to kind of bring it up to what we would want to enjoy and have as a little lakeside cottage location. And your other question around, zoning or the history of the property, it had started around the 1900s. This huge lodge building was put up, and it's crazy because we spent an extensive amount of time and money remodeling this building now. And at first, the first season, we were just sitting there telling people that we were going to take it down because there was lots of water damage. There had been some poor renovations done maybe in like the 70s, and tons of things that we were like, this structure is probably not going to work out but you don't know until you start peeling everything back. When we did go through with that and started peeling everything back, the structure was so solid. It was more plumb and level than most of the buildings that I see now in a day-to-day. It's crazy what they were able to do at that time with construction and these huge beams that supported it. It still boggles my mind. we were able to leverage that. And previously, that structure had served as a restaurant. So there was also in the past, and the previous owners that we purchased it from did not run the restaurant and bar, but there are lots of memories, and people will still stop by the cabins in the summer and say, oh, I used to come here. And I think that it was a German couple that owned it before, and they just raved about their breakfasts and their food. So yeah, it definitely had a commercial angle already. We were not trying to redesignate or zone anything, but it had been out of date for some time.
That makes sense. No, and curious about, because a little bit offline we had talked about potentially you guys had doing a phased approach. Is this project the one that you guys are phasing into multiple
We phase
projects?
everything. Phase
And
is
that's
like
smart.
Lynn
And I'd love to
phasing
talk about it.
Makela. Yeah,
I'd love to talk about that because
certainly.
I feel like a lot of people think that, oh, you take on this massive development, you have to do everything all at one go. But in reality, most of the time, you want to have a more deliberate way of saying, okay, well, let's do this first, cash flow this, and get it rolling so we can actually make this project work viably long term.
Yeah, I agree. We have to, that's always been our approach because we are not deep pocketed. We do not have the money to support all of these expensive updates that we want to bring. I have champagne dreams on a Bud Light budget, let me tell you. So it is definitely one of those things that we've always approached thoughtfully. And even in our first project of trying to partner with a company that was going to come in and do everything new, I look back at that now and I'm like, wow, we would have put ourselves in such a leveraged position, possibly over leveraged without enough data to be able to have made those choices effectively. And we would have done it because we would have thought about how we could make it work. And I mean, we were both working full time still. So we were like, all right, we're willing to like do this to get this new build to like run this for forever. But now looking at what we've learned about ourselves, looking what we've learned about our market and what we really enjoy doing, I don't want to maybe run cabins forever. I became an operator. And so yes, from the very beginning, we phased out that project. Even when we started our first cabin, we did that over the course of 2 years in focusing on inside first, and the necessities, right? Like utilities, new decking, those kinds of things. And we did the same thing at the resort. We really leaned into that first year of just, hey, let's clean this. Let's do a real deep clean because that was a problem. And let's paint things. Let's get electrical fixture updates. But let's just see how it goes and see what people think and not make too many changes because we wanted to be able to make those decisions once we'd had a season under us. And so after that first season and still in that first season, we were telling people we were going to take down that main building. But we got to the point where we wanted to dig in. So we ran that first season, July 2020 to October 2020. Had a better sense of income. We'd actually done better in that reduced operating point than the previous owners had done, and not even running at full capacity. We kept a couple cabins offline because we just weren't confident that they would be able to work effectively for people coming in. And we didn't want to have that uncertainty in having to host people and then panic that something wasn't working. So we always left a cabin offline so that if something did go wrong, we could move people into another space pretty easily. And we used that first 6 months, not even 5 months of data in order to give us the baseline for what we thought we could go back to the bank for, and then went forward with a construction loan. And so when we did that, at the same time, we were evaluating that lodge building, deciding what we were going to do there and putting together a grander plan. And so that would be what I would have considered like maybe phase 2. If phase 1 was like just make it operational, phase 2 was like, all right, how far could we make this money go? And what do we want to take in terms of leverage for ourselves and for this business? It happened to be perfectly timed with the market too. So we're talking like construction loan rate of like 4.7 for that just amazing few moments of the world. And that was our next phase, was essentially a list of projects. We remodeled 2 cabins within that construction loan, as well as we completed the upstairs of what we call now that lodge space, which is the Aurora Major Suite. And that was our intention, was to put kind of a higher end piece of or asset on the property. Even though it's attached, we actually built it in the upstairs, but we wanted to see what we could do with a brand new space that was designed with more luxurious intentions than some of the other cabins. And that cabin has been our top performer, or suite has been top performer now. It's been online for 2 years and continues to turn heads because it is just an amazing space.
It is gorgeous. I have spent time there and it is amazing, and everyone should go try it out. And so speaking to that, then when you've talked about the construction loan, but then clearly you had bought the property. Can you maybe give us a high level of how did you figure out the funds for this, and how did you even know which banks to go to that a construction loan was available, to maybe talk through that?
Yeah, we definitely didn't know what we didn't know. And we were pretty much going around. We probably didn't even know what a commercial loan was at the time when we were walking in. And we just went essentially to the same lender that we had our residential loan through. And we were like, hi, we want to do this. Is this possible? And he asked a lot of questions. I really think he kind of sat back in his chair. I actually have a meeting with him tomorrow. It's cracking me up. So thinking about this is perfect. But He sat back in his chair and he was like, "You want to do what? You run one Airbnb for 1 year and you want to do what?" Like, so it was definitely a lot of proving ourselves. Like I mentioned, we maintained W-2 jobs, so the bank saw that as way less of a risk. We also were able to negotiate a really good deal on the property when we acquired it because the sellers were very much looking to be done and out. We even made her, like, when we negotiated the purchase price of the resort, we were working pretty closely with her realtor. We bypassed using a seller's agent and worked directly, or a buyer's agent, sorry, and worked directly with a seller's agent. And we had submitted our offer, our purchase agreement, and we were talking to him. He called and we were like, okay, when we submit this, we don't want you to take offense, but we want you to know that the property is in rough shape. It will take a lot of money to bring back to what it needs to be a successfully run business, in our opinion. And this is the price that we'd be willing to pay if you do not want to come back, because the owner had moved out. She had caretakers in place, and she was kind of assuming during this time of winter, she was in North Carolina and she was planning to come back up in May, reopen the cabins, run the business for another year. And so we kind of made this is our offer that you will not have to come back, just have a couple of phone calls with us and we will figure it out. And we were surprised and shocked when he came back and said that she accepted the offer, no negotiation. Like, that was just it. She was just so ready to be done. And that's what made a huge opportunity for us in what we could do with that lower price point for the resort.
Yeah, getting in at a good basis definitely solves a lot of solves some problems. Allows you to make a little bit more of speculation on certain other things. So
definitely, yeah, it feels like a unicorn, right? It feels like a once in a lifetime opportunity to be able to snag this incredible piece of property with 700 feet of freshwater frontage on the coolest lake in the world. And I say that like with so much, like, I don't take it lightly. We really nailed that one, and I don't think we'll ever be able to do it again.
Hey, no, you can do it. You just find the right opportunity. But yeah, so related to the banking side of things, because another challenge that a lot of people have when they first look to do these projects is being able to get a bank on board with whatever vision they have. Now, in your case, you luckily have been able to do something at a smaller scale already very close by, so you had kind of a precedent already set. Did you go to the same bank that you used when you did that project, or did you guys self-fund that project altogether, so you had to kind of start from scratch when it came to lending?
Are we talking about the cabins, or are we talking about the new project?
The cabin. We'll dive into the new project
good
shortly.
Yeah. For the cabins, we did all self-funding. So we did not take on any outside investment. We worked with the bank and self-funded it. We have a really, I guess my husband and I are super complementary in our skills. I don't know, maybe that's not the right word, but crazy and complementary skills, where he is very numbers focused. And so he put together a pro forma that did impress the bank enough for them to be like, yeah, you risky people, I suppose we'll give this a shot. And we combined that with visualizations, renderings, ideas that we wanted to bring to life, and just kind of showed them the transition that we were looking for, tried to get really close with numbers, worked really closely with contractors, because once we did that construction loan, we knew we did a lot of it. Like, I'll be honest, our families are very scrappy. We have electricians in the family, and my husband was brought up kind of working on projects, building things in Michigan his whole life. So we had a lot of expertise that we drew from, personal friends that were contractors. And so we were able to be very, very scrappy when it came to that construction loan. And I think staying scrappy really helped us set the stage for future opportunities, because we were able to deliver on everything we told the bank we were going to do, and do it with the appropriate funds that we had allotted, or going back to them and working with them when we'd run into hiccups. We did reposition our plan after getting some quotes back. We thought we were going to be able to overhaul the septic situation. And the quote that we got, the estimate that we got, was it was going to be between 20 to 100 grand to put in a new septic for the property. And we were like, wow, that is a really big range. I guess as long as we know that's the range, we will put that into the plan and go to the bank with the plan. So we got approval for our loan. Everything came back, and we got a firmed up quote from a contractor who could actually install the septic, and that came in at $280,000. And we were like, wow, okay, so we don't believe in quotes here. This is apparently not real life. And we just decided at that point, we did not have active problems. We were just trying to get ahead of what could potentially be issues down the road. And so we're like, all right, we'll continue to maintain these current. And it was also, there's multiple septics on the property. We were looking to combine them and change the wastewater treatment system a bit. And so there's nothing wrong with them. We elected to to make that deferred maintenance for the future. And so we were able to reposition and work with the bank on what would be more impactful for the top line revenue numbers. And we're able to put in some more cabin upgrades that ended up adding value. And they were happy with the way that we handled that transition and kind of the news. I feel like everything we do in every phase of development is like, how are we pivoting with this new information? How are we pivoting to make this work and be a more appropriate story for the situation we face?
Very much so. So one comment on the bank thing and then one more question. But when you were talking about how you packaged it up for the bank and you were selling them on both that you guys had W-2s, that you had experience with the Airbnb, that you had experience in construction, all of that, when you're going to get a commercial loan, when you're trying to get a construction loan, that all plays a huge role into how your loan officer will then go to the committee and say, hey, I'm going to fight for you in that. So the way with the renderings and preparing your whole story, you're really getting your person, your contact at the bank on board to then go present to the bank and say, this is, yes, it's risky, but this is a one we should bet on and we should loan them money. So that's huge in preparing that. And then with the bank, did you go to a Wells Fargo, a Chase, or what kind of bank did you pick for this one?
Hometown proud. It is a regional bank that we worked with. And I do love, to your point, Christy, there's probably a lot of missteps in our financing journey and that we probably should have gone and we got multiple rate requests and we're trying to find multiple commercial lenders. But we had such a good experience with our lender that we really didn't shop it. So we went in, we essentially built that case, like you said, got all of that data and that information, answered all the questions, armed him to the hilt with as much information as we could give him for what we believed we could do. And he was willing to take a bet on us. So we didn't go around and look much further. I will say this bank it's a larger regional bank. So, if you're thinking about, going to a big bank, I don't think I ever would have had a chance going to a big bank. And I don't think I would have had a chance going to too small of a bank either, because we're still in a rural enough community where there's some that won't even do commercial loans or construction loans or land loans. So it does help to, and now I know those terms. I didn't know those terms when I was doing this project, but those are the things I guess you learn and you think about, how can I make different or maybe better choices in the future with this information.
Yeah, you realize after you start talking to enough lenders that what their appetites are, because to your all's point, they keep these loans on their books. It's not like there's a secondary market a lot of times where you can sell these loans to a larger investor. So a lot of times they're taking a chance on you as an entrepreneur, and they're going to hold this note over time. So they want to make sure that it's performing. And if you can arm them with the tools they need to make that justification to the committee, obviously that's going to help your cause immensely. So, curious related to, this project that you're already kind of gotten shored up. So it looks like you've already done phase one. You've started or about to finish phase two. What does phase three look like? And then we can kind of dive into your latest project.
Yeah, so at the cabins right now, we have done a lot of stabilization. We do have some spaces that we're still looking to build out, and it's kind of that bottom area. We've essentially added a few different income streams if you think about it. But we added a retail space, kind of a central check-in space. Even though we kind of operate on that Airbnb model, and people tend to be a little bit more independent, we give them a lot of information, digital codes, all these things, like so that when you arrive, you can have a contactless check-in if you like. But we do have that retail space, and that's been improving every year. Someone wants to pick up a piece of something to remember their stay by. And last year, our big phase three last year was launching a sauna on the property. And so that actually became a fixture that we didn't know how well it would do. It was taking a gamble. My husband is Finnish. This whole area that we live in has a lot of Nordic, Scandinavian, and specifically Finnish roots. And so we knew from the moment we saw the property that it really needed to have a sauna. Because have you ever taken a sauna? You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah,
okay,
I have.
okay.
I have. Yeah. It's
Cool.
pretty great. They're awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So imagine your sauna experience, and then imagine a infinity pool water view, as well as a cold plunge in one of the coolest freshwater lakes you could ever have. And so we would introduce our guests, many of them traveling from the cities, from Chicago, from Minneapolis, from Detroit, and even further away. We've hosted people from all over the world now, but we do have a pretty solid base in regionally Midwest and even down into the south of it. And some of them never have experienced sauna other than maybe something that they would walk into in a gym and turn something on, dark, a little scary, not sure how long it's been since it's been cleaned. And so we have a waterfront picturesque multi-window view where you're sitting in there having an awesome time, and then you're jumping into Lake Superior at, which at its highest is like 55 degrees, and oftentimes like somewhere in the 40s. Right now I think it's in the low 40s. And we would have people come up like shrieking with excitement and joy, and just being able to like give them this cultural experience, but also this something that they've just never done in this way before, was a really interesting notation for us. We knew we wanted it. We knew it would be cool. We didn't realize how much people would love it, I think, is what we didn't know. And our area used to have a lot of public saunas, but they had been phased out over time. Over time, people just started putting, the locals started putting saunas in their backyard. And so the idea of a space that you could go pay someone to use their sauna was a little like momentarily forgotten, I feel like, in our area's history. And so that was the big part of phase 3. There's still some work that we, have plans to do. But right now we've got things in a place where each summer we've got our team in place. We go through the motions. And so it's at a spot where, the phases have kind of become less concrete, and maybe the timeline's more ill-defined as we've been looking at other projects. And that's really where where Christy and I met, was, trying to figure out the next phase, what to do, finding another project, and then being like, oh my gosh, what could this possibly look like? I don't know that we're ready to do anything this large, but
I seem to remember standing in the freezing cold outside, holding up a set of plans, looking at this building. Do you want to tell us about that, and how you found it, where it was at, and how it came to be?
Yeah. So I'd say like 2023, we started trying to figure out what we could do next. We knew that operating a hospitality business was really, really hard. And I think we had done it well, but it wasn't something that really lit us up. And so it was like, okay, we have an opportunity to just continue running this thing, and making a good life of that. And, we could potentially retire and be comfortable with where this is going, but we weren't there. We wanted to do the next thing. And so I spent some time talking to our local city officials, even before meeting Christy, and trying to identify a path to work on some projects that were a little bit closer to where we physically lived, in the city of Hancock, really. And so made some contacts there, had some really good conversations, some soul searching with even our city officials and some of our regional development educators and folks in our community and in our state that are just designed to help developers, which was novel to me, because I was like, we just spent blood, sweat, and tears ourselves up on Lake Superior, all self-funded, no money. And she's like, have you heard of the MEDC riprap loan? And like, have you heard of this? And like this type of grant? And I was like, no. And my eyes are just, getting wide and big and like saucers. And that was about when I started to beg Christy to come hang out and check out this space to see if I was crazy. And I don't think we had the offer in yet we did. We were in the process of making the offer, but that was, when you came. But there was a piece of property that came up, a prime location that kind of separates our two cities, where we have a canal that runs through the middle. And when I say canal, it's like a large river, I would call it. It connects to Lake Superior. So it's a very big waterway. We've even seen cruise ships go through in the last couple of years, because why not, I guess. But Houghton and Hancock are the sister cities, or the cities on each side. It's connected by a lift bridge. And so this prime piece of real estate in Hancock had been developed. They had it's about 2008 was the original construction of what was called the Beach Club. And then there was a private gym above it. And this space had been purchased in the COVID era, but had been renovated, or like partially renovated, but not completed. And so this came for sale in 2020. Oh gosh, what year is it? What day is it? 2020. I think it was late 2023. So like we had been looking at a lot of things in 2023, hadn't pulled any triggers, hadn't really defined what we wanted to do next. But late 2023, a for sale sign went up. So it wasn't even, we didn't find it off market. I wish we had. But we had seen some people working there, but not very quickly. And we were kind of excited that it was going to be developed, because we just wanted it to be a cool place. It was going to be, the owner that bought it during COVID was going to turn it into a restaurant. So he had started this huge renovation project to turn it into a large commercial kitchen for catering and hosting events and all these wonderful things. And we saw the for sale sign go up. We were like, dang, what does this mean?
And I remember you first telling me about a restaurant, and to me, like, that is the worst business. I would never want to operate one. And I'm like, oh no, like, I don't know. And not knowing the area that you're in and what's there. And is this a community that is stagnant? Is this growing? What's happening? And that's where being a local is so key, because I came up to visit, and Lynn set up this whirlwind of a tour, meeting with so many different types of people in the market. And by the end of it, I'm blown away going, I don't see how you don't do this, but that's because of all the local insights you had. Maybe explain a little bit about who, like everyone that you brought to the table and why you knew ahead of time that this was solid, this was your next move.
Well, I mean, Christy, a large reason that I knew it was going to be our next move was because I had you on my shoulder. But also, we just hadn't done a project this big. We didn't know how to think about your financial stack, like what that's going to look like, how you're going to put a larger project together. We had, like we said, been self-funded. We got a great deal. We'd been pretty scrappy. We had great interest rates. Like we hadn't seen the hardship that came from making a deal work on paper, because we would have had to been really dumb to not be able to make our deal work. So when we met Christy, started to talk about this project, she really encouraged me to share as much as possible with our local city and like share what our vision was, and not just with them, with a lender, with multiple lenders. We went and met a couple of lenders when she was here. And I also knew our community inside and out, right? Went to college here, spent on and off 20 years in this location. And I knew what I wanted to do. And I just hoped that other people would want to do it too. And I knew that this piece of property, although when it came on the market in 2020 was so much more expensive than when it was purchased in 2020, but I was also able to see the rise that's happening in our area. People are they're able to be remote now. We had a ton of people, they call them, and we also have climate refugees, which is a term that I learned from a realtor, just talking to people in our local community, folks that would be out in California or somewhere in the South and just buy a piece of property up here sight unseen because they knew that we had fresh water and we weren't having the hot summers that some of the other parts of the country are having. And so we've had a change in the type of people that are coming here, and it's becoming more than just a university town. We are growing in some industry. We're still kind of constricted from an industry perspective, but with the availability of remote work, we are seeing a lot more people move here, one person with a remote job and one person, looking for a job locally. And we do have a little bit of a tech bubble, given that our university that's here is really focused in engineering. And so we see a lot of leaning into tech focused companies and startups. And so that was the reason we came back. So we knew that there was change happening already. And that kind of, I think, helped us be more risky, about what we thought we could do with this new project. And also having Christy walk me through all of the little pieces, because we hadn't had to deal with such large, I think the due diligence process, while it is a checklist and very helpful to go through, you just never know what's going to happen in the course of trying to talk about an idea and share what you want to do, and make sure that you can do all of that in a time and a budget and a timeline that makes sense for someone to actually sell you the piece of property. It's such a, I don't know, roll of the dice a little bit when you're trying to negotiate some of those deals.
Definitely.
And you touched on due diligence a little bit, but also I know how you did the financing. Do you want to talk first about maybe the due diligence that went into how then you finished structuring all of the financing for it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we went into this deal. It was an on market on the MLS deal. And so we didn't know the seller. We had no connection with him other than through the realtors, which I personally hate. Sorry, I love realtors, but I hate not being able to talk to sellers. And so we started this deal at arm's length and went back and forth a couple of times. I originally had asked if he had any interest in seller financing, because that was important to us to be able to make the numbers work. The other piece of it, when we looked at the price, the asking price of this property, and it was essentially double. It had gone, I think it sold in early 2020 for like 500, and he was asking like 1.2. And so we started to look at this property, and instead of just saying, wow, how do you make 1.2 on a restaurant, which is not what we wanted to do. I agree with Christy. There's no world ever. You don't even want me to make you toast. Like, I am not going to be anyone that's operating a restaurant. But we looked at the property as a whole. And I think that's where people started to, maybe there was an opportunity that people didn't see. So the property is almost an acre. In addition to this partially renovated structure, 2-story structure, 5,000 square foot building, there's also a giant pavilion, really good shape, concrete, like awesome structure. And then on the further side of the property, there was a garage, and the garage is not worth the lumber that's in it at this point, but it was enough of a space for us to be able to come in and think about how we might lay out a set of experiences, a set of businesses even, that could support that monthly payment. And I think for someone coming in and being like, okay, I can turn this into a restaurant, how am I going to make this much money to cover the mortgage? It would have been extremely hard. But when we came in, what I started to tell Christy about what we had learned from up north was that, wow, people really like sauna. I wonder if we could bring a sauna business down to this property. I wonder if we could, find someone that would be willing to operate some sort of bar or brewery in this space. Like, how could we think about ways that we could be landlords essentially and be able to cultivate cool experiences that would cover the mortgage for this property? And then when we went into that process, like that thinking process, we were like getting more excited about it, and we had to, go do the due diligence and actually work with the lender or the seller on it. And so our first volley, I think, was just like shut right down. Like, I don't even think he responded, because I think we asked about seller financing, and maybe, but like we were going in with like sporty numbers, like, hey, it's not built out. Like, it's going to take a lot of money to build this out. And it did start enough of a dialogue though. So we're still working through the realtors at this point. We started this dialogue with the seller. He was pretty much like hard pass. And so we were like digging in with his realtor, trying to understand like where the miss was, what we could do, talking to Christy at the same time, like, okay, how could we maybe think about this again? Do we want to go with this again? Clearly we did. And we came up with another offer. We worked with our lender. We started talking to multiple lenders at that point. So we were trying to figure out what we could do in terms of pricing, also thinking at the same time, trying to put together that multi-business or like property plan that would support whatever lending we got. But we knew at the same time that we had to get the most attractive offer that we could for acquisition price that we could in order to make any of it work. So we went through that process. I would say that as we started to talk and go back and forth with different offers, we started to learn different things. Also, I think it got back to him who we were, and he started to talk about us. He had heard, and we didn't. This is kind of unbeknownst to us. Our community's small though, and I think once he saw who we were, what we were, thinking about as we were sharing it in this offer letter, he probably asked around and found out what we were doing up north and was like, okay, interesting. So we hadn't met, but he, I think, had some understanding that we were not just there to, come in and snake it for a low price and like not do anything with it or do something shisty. We were local, so it had all these promising opportunities in that part of it. And so finally, we were able to negotiate an offer with him. We actually met him and started talking about the property. And that made a huge difference because I think we got the signed offer in January. We had wanted to close in I think it was April or May, but as life happens, as due diligence happens, we did not actually end up closing until July. And so,
are you an aspiring real estate developer who wants to get in the game but feels overwhelmed by where to start? What if I personally mentored you, giving you the exact guidance and strategies to complete your first development project without making costly mistakes or needing millions in the bank? Would you take me up on that offer? I'm Christy Candle, and I've developed over $450 million in projects across the country. After nearly 20 years in development, I created this mentorship to give you the exact guidance and support I wish I had when I started. Are you next?
we went through a lot of iterations, a lot of back and forth when it came to all aspects of the due diligence process in order to close that property. And I would say we almost gained a friend at the same time as we were going through that, because the seller was really excited about our vision. We did have time to share it. He was willing to take us through and show us everything he did and what he was doing. He even offered to consult for a while. And he really wanted it to be a restaurant, and we kind of shut that down right away. Not in a negative way, but just saying, I think a restaurant could be in the future, but it's certainly not part of what we feel like we could take on now. And I think we were able to win him over in that we wanted to do multiple things on the property. We wanted to be able to bring it back to life. He was very passionate about making it a community hotspot, and I think we shared that passion. And so we did end up also talking him into seller financing, and we actually ended up increasing the seller financing as we went through the process because of unexpected fees and things that happened as we went through due diligence.
That's awesome. That's interesting.
I feel like I'm talking
he owned
a lot,
the building.
you guys.
No, it's fine. No. So he owned the building outright at that point. Is that correct?
He had a mortgage on it. Yeah, good question. So he did have a mortgage on it as well. So he was going to be paying off his lender, as well as trying to, from his perspective, try to get the money out that he had been putting it in. So he had put probably $200 to $300K into the renovation that was not complete at the time when we were walking the property and trying to convince everyone that we would be able to buy it. So he had some outstanding numbers that he had to hit. But I also think this wasn't his first rodeo. He's an entrepreneur. He has other real estate and assets. And so I think that also certainly helped us in being able to work with him on what that final stack of that financial stack ended up looking like.
So curiosity. So you identify this as an opportunity. You start going back and forth with the real estate agent about trying to get this thing under contract. You finally come to terms, you get this thing under contract, you start going through due diligence. During that due diligence phase, I'm assuming, did you start to try to put a plan into place so that once you ultimately close on the property that you could start executing from the ground level? And what did that plan look like as you were walking through the due diligence process?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That was definitely a part of every step of the way. I think the moment we had even found the property, I was immediately calling other business owners that I knew. Specifically, we have some relationships because of our sauna passion and culture. You know, we have some relationships with some folks who build saunas commercially and have had experience building out spaces. And so he was one of my first calls to Justin over at Cedar and Stone and like, hey, how could we come up with something that when we do close on this, we could potentially drop saunas and start generating income within a couple of months. And so that was one part of it. We were also talking to as many people as we could that we knew that owned a brewery or restaurants. You know, we knew that the potential was there to have that in the space. And so we started reaching out to everyone we knew in our Rolodex and approaching them to see if they had any interest in finding a new location and expansion. So all of those pieces were happening as we went through the due diligence process. And as we continued down that path, you know, we didn't find anyone that wanted to do a bar restaurant concept. And while we were crazy enough to do the sauna and we felt pretty good about it, I think that was the biggest, you know, kind of red flag in our mind was how are we going to do this business that we've never done before if we are crazy enough to do it. But then the longer we sat and thought about it, we were like, gosh, this could be so cool if. And we do have vision and we do have ideas that we want to bring into our community. And so we quickly became in love with our own idea after not being able to find the right partners or the right potential tenants to come in and take that space over. Even if we had built it out to suit, I think we were definitely in love with our own idea pretty quickly. And it would have been a hard pivot otherwise. But that comes with its own
Definitely.
trials and tribulations in that approach as well.
Well, yeah, and that's a great point as well, because I think that, you know, the starting of the actual plan can happen. You should happen during due diligence, you know. And I've done this. Well, I don't have nearly as much of experience as you guys on the development side, but I've had experience in my own personal investments and representing other people on the transactional side of identifying buildings and then finding tenants before you can try to close. So you try to leverage those local connections to say, hey, we got this building come available. Maybe you know that the area is growing because of your intimate knowledge of the area. You can kind of speak to the traits of the building as to why it could be a beneficial opportunity. And then from there, you can try to negotiate a deal to where you immediately add some value to the building prior to, sometimes, hopefully you can do it before closing, but if you can't, then obviously you start that dialogue. So you start building momentum in that direction. So it was great to hear that you know, obviously knew that this could potentially work in this space. And you learn a lot just by that exercise, because you realize after going through that exercise, you say, oh, well, maybe we pivot now because we've gotten feedback from the marketplace saying, hey, this could be a great XYZ. And you said, I never really thought about that. Maybe let's go ahead and take this on. So
I definitely agree with you there. And I think at the beginning of it, we knew we wanted to own the dirt, right? We were like, this is such a cool piece of property. I don't know what goes on it. And we weren't too hung up on anything other than trying to make a cash flow and cover the mortgage. I mean, someone could have come in and told me that they wanted to run something entirely crazy. And if they had a business plan that worked, I would have been like, absolutely, let's figure that out. That sounds great because I just want to own this dirt. How do I make that happen? And it just became, the longer we got into it, we were like, okay, we're going to have to figure out how we own this dirt, and we are going to have to set up the structure and the cash flow streams in order to do it. And we did get excited about that because we love connecting and working, collaborating with other people. And so we were able to, for the first time, find partners in order to make this happen. And so that was a key part of our evolution, I think, as we became more confident with what we knew we could do, and also what we had in our back pocket of, you know, things that we've done confidently already. And so being open to that and understanding partnerships and collaboration and being able to, and I mean that in a good and bad way. We've had bad, you know, partnerships and collaboration. So we've learned some things, and, you know, we wanted to bring that into what could make the most sense for this piece of property and for the next few years, and eventually, you know, what the exit strategy would look like too. And so just getting that knowledge and doing a lot of self-education to try to understand what the need was from the community, what our needs were personally, and the players that could possibly be assets to figuring out those puzzle pieces. I think that's where we have found that lights us up and gets us really excited about, okay, how do we don't have to do everything alone. how can we find people that are uniquely aligned and thinking and have the same passions and things that we have? And we've been super, super fortunate that those people just seem to drop out of the sky when we need them. I don't know how like that happens, but you put that out into the universe, and the universe has delivered for us time and time again on this project with bringing the right people at the right time to be able to get from where we were last year at this time when we were stressing about numbers and trying to figure out if we could close the deal. I think, Christy, it's probably the 1-year anniversary where I called you in tears because we got the environmental back and found out we'd have to go to like a phase 2 and have to potentially spend, minimum spend $20K, potentially spend hundreds of thousands in remediation, which if that was the case, it never would have worked. It was an interesting, maybe not never, I shouldn't say never. Maybe we would have come up with a really cool way to have someone pay for the remediation, or there was like some really cool pilot. I don't know. We could have figured it out. But at that moment, at that time, it was definitely a roller coaster. And to think back to a year ago before we even had the dirt to where it is now it's
incredible. I went back, was it exactly the next January or was it 2 Januaries after? I don't know.
Just
the
next January. Yeah, it was
the
like
next
January. 13
January.
months. Yeah.
Okay. And seeing all of the progress from what had been and what was there and the impact on the community. Maybe quickly on the partnerships, both from the maybe manufacturers and people that you brought in, but also any other partners that you brought in as equity partners, just super high level, how that came together.
Yeah, we did identify, and just kind of through our sharing of our journey and just basic like friendships that we've had, we did find a partner that was willing to come in and partner on the equity side of the project, and so worked out a holding company plan for this agreement, and was able to bring that in and make it a part of the debt stack, which was really helpful for us. That helped us save some of our personal capital for being able to build out the spaces, because then we did find out we were going to do it ourselves, and that would be a great thing to have as backup. And so that was one partner. As I mentioned, we did partner on the build out of the sauna space, and that was a really helpful commercial partnership that allowed us to achieve a much faster cash flow. We were able to be up and running in October for the winter season, which tends to be a little bit more stronger from a sauna perspective, and we were able to see cash flow, within 3 months of buying a piece of property that had nothing on it and was not even, no occupancy was granted. We were able to have a cash flowing business outside in a way that maybe others wouldn't have approached the project. And so that kind of gave us momentum, and then we turned into inside, and we did end up also bringing in a partner to help with the launch of Small Craft, which is a bar cocktail space that now sits in the downstairs of that building. We were able to phase occupancy, so we have occupancy now for part of the building, and we are just about to call the inspector probably within the next 24 hours to get our occupancy for the upstairs and unleash our event space and event planning for the summer.
That's exciting. Yeah, no, and it kind of goes to show, to your point, that you've had this vision of what you thought we wanted to be. You went through the process of trying to get the project formulated in that manner. You got feedback from the marketplace. You pivoted, and you ultimately knew a piece of the puzzle was already there because of your previous experiences. Obviously, you had the sauna space that you knew it could potentially do well because you'd seen it do well in another capacity, and so you brought a unique insight into that. Their phases, obviously, you're starting to implement, and I'm sure they'll do very well. And now you've brought what used to be a building that didn't have a utility, right? It was just sitting there vacant, and you brought it to life, and now it's become a integral part of that community. And so, kind of curious about your insights pertaining to, community-driven development. Like, what does that mean to you? Is that kind of what you're going for in all the developments you're targeting? And then what does that mean?
Yeah, it definitely is what we're going for. I could not make anything nearly as cool if I wasn't willing to share my ideas with other people in our community and have them bring back additional ideas. We partnered with a business owner who's 2 blocks away from the Navy Street property, and she is an art store owner, and she's also a muralist, and she has designed murals that go across the property that, one, hide the ugly thing that I don't want them to see for the foreseeable future until we have enough time and money to redevelop everything as we would want to, but 2, bring so much personality and flair into the space. And it's so cool to be able to say, yeah, this local muralist, you can go buy your art supplies from her 2 blocks up the road. We also have a we have a brewer locally who's like starting his brewery, but he's working on it. It's a work in progress. And we've actually hired him on. He's our events manager. He's hoping to like bring in a really cool environment for craft beer and wants people to come in and love tasting. And it kind of sets the stage for him to be able to open. And I know he's not going to work for me forever. I know he wants to open a brewery and I can't wait to help him do that. And I want to help him find the space and build it out. And so I could not imagine, our partner on the business, he got his general license. I cannot wait to find the next thing that we do with him, because everyone's shared vision just makes something so much stronger when we've had some time to think about what our impact we want to leave and how we could do that together. I could not imagine being able to do this any other way than if we weren't able to like talk to these cool players, figure out we've got mutually aligned goals and opportunities and that we want to bring them to life.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer.
So Lynn, after doing your first couple projects and developments and where you're at now, what advice would you have for people who are on the fence, on the sideline, about to get in? Maybe they're flipping houses now. Maybe they have some Airbnbs and they're like, wait, I just heard myself in, Lynn, but how do I get to where you're going? How do I actually take action? What advice would you give for someone?
Find a network. Just start educating yourself. When I knew that we had bought Fresh Coast and we were excited about it, but I was like, this isn't the end for us. We've got to figure out a plan here. I don't even know where to start. I started looking online for groups and educational opportunities, coaching, masterclass type things. I wanted to just understand what I didn't know. And I did multiple of them until I found you, Christy. But also like I wanted to educate myself. Do I want to be in multifamily? And I didn't even know what multifamily was at the time. To be in development. I didn't really, I felt like development was a big scary word that people did in cities, and it didn't even feel like it fit my small community. But I now know there are developers here. It is hard to understand that when you're just at that point of like, okay, I'm remodeling this house and I'm going to rent it out and it's going to cash flow maybe $100, maybe $200, and that's great and that's exciting. But there's so much to learn, and so just not stopping your learning journey. And I think also asking yourself like, what are the things about what you're doing that you're so excited to learn more of? Because when we realized that for us, it wasn't running a hospitality business, it kind of broke our brains a little bit, kind of shattered our plan. We're like, well, what are we going to do with this if it's not a hospitality business? And then we didn't even know how to answer that question, or even that we could ask that question. And even when we bought the resort in the first place, I think we didn't even know that it didn't have to be a resort, right? It could be anything. We could put in a golf course. We're not doing that. But like you could do anything with it. And that was not even in our minds at all that was possible. And we just didn't have any other knowledge of it. And so again, just as much education, as much networking, like finding people that think a little bit like you, or at least think a little bit differently, makes a huge difference. And it fuels your fire and it helps you, even if it's not the right thing right away, like just continuing to have conversations with people really opened up my eyes, led me to amazing, incredible people, a fierce tribe of women that I've connected with and know Christy through. And now, we all go on retreats and more educational opportunities together. We're doing classes together, and it's so much fun to have found a group that doesn't make you feel like you're so crazy for not wanting to sit behind a desk all day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously building that community is so important, and oftentimes all it takes is just reaching out to people, because what you'll find oftentimes is people who have taken on different projects that you're maybe interested in. They may see something of themselves in you by you starting your journey and showing that you're actually taking action in that direction. And so, I love getting calls from people who, I'm in the commercial brokerage space, and I love getting calls from people who are looking to get into the brokerage space, and they've done a bunch of research and they're trying to get insights from me as far as what it takes to be successful in the space, because that's where I was 5-6 years ago. And if I see that you've taken action in that direction, it makes a huge impact. And if anyone who's taken on a new project, you may not have the skills yet or may not have the knowledge yet, but if you show initiative in a particular direction and then make it known to people who have taken on those projects, oftentimes they're willing to at least sit down with you to talk a little bit about what they could potentially help you with, or maybe make a connection or what. That's a great advice.
So true. There's so many mutually beneficial opportunities out there, and none of us would be on this call if I hadn't posted, does anyone have an experience in making condo associations out of, single parcels? Because that was the message that Christy responded to. And we got on a call. She's like, what are you trying to do here? And I'm like, I don't know. That's why we're all here.
Yeah. So one thing that obviously we appreciate all the insights you've shared, and we know that you're busy, and we want to make sure that we're respectful of your time as well. But as far as what we typically do is at the end of these podcasts is we have a concept of something called the developer treasure chest, or the developer chest. I'm sorry, where we offer different resources to people who listen to the podcast, and just to kind of gain insight from the lessons that they've learned, from the lessons that our guests have learned from the development process. And so I'm not sure, usually they could be helpful PDFs or anything in particular that you think would be of value to the audience. And I thought we just give you an opportunity to kind of share any insight you have in that front. I don't know if you have any case studies or anything that you would be willing to share.
Yeah, I mean, you mean in mass distribution format, like something that's like shareable like
it
that?
doesn't have to be anything elaborate either. It's more of just anything that maybe you've condensed into either a PDF or so a lot of times we'll have people who have written a book or something, whatever that is. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything significant, but it can be something that's just kind of like, hey, if just could be helpful insights to potential people who are listening to the podcast.
Raphael, I don't need one more reason to write a book. I mean, like, come on. No, I'm just kidding.
To do it.
No, that sounds great. No,
It's
I
fun.
understand what you mean. Yeah, and we do have resources. So I have partnered with Christy to create some resources for people. And I think a really good one that I would recommend looking at are the 5 partners that you need before you start your development deal. Before you found that property and you're already like heart eye emojiing. That is a really great, quick, simple guide to these are the people that are going to make an impact in your life, and you have the opportunity to kind of grow and choose who you want on your team. And that team development at the very beginning is more important than you will ever realize until you're many years beyond that point. And I'm more than happy to share that, of course, as well as my future book.
You should.
I love it.
Feels so funny, but yeah, okay. I like this. I like where this is going.
So, Lynn, how can people support or connect with you with the different businesses and things that you're doing in developments? What's the best way for them to follow along?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely stay in touch with the local real estate developer podcast, as well as our Instagram handle. Personally, I am Lynn Makela, just no space, all lowercase, and I share all about our journey there, as well as on local real estate developer. You can also follow along Fresh Coast Cabins, a handle on Instagram. freshcoastcabins.com is where you can kind of see that first project that we talked a little bit about. And Small Craft is the new one. Small Craft Co. is the handle and the website. And Taka Saunas is the brand, the sauna brand that we've now branched into 2 different locations. And we are actually looking at a 3rd location for this summer where we might be supporting a new space in our region. So really excited to have you follow along with that. If you like contrast therapy, hot, cold, a little bit of wellness, it is also a great brand to follow. So Taka Saunas with an S.com and Taka Saunas Instagram handle as well. And yeah, that's probably the deep dive on all those places. So you probably, did anyone get that? Like, there's gonna be show notes, right?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So we'll make sure to include that in the show notes so everyone who's listening can have access to that. And please follow along. I mean, Lynn's doing some awesome stuff, and I'm really excited to follow along with your journey in the future. Well, Lynn, again, thank you so much for your time. We obviously greatly appreciate it, and you did share a lot of great insights. For those of you guys who are listening to the podcast, please like and subscribe. It makes a big impact on our ability to reach a broader audience. Along with that, if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, 5-star reviews make a huge impact. So please do that. It really does make an impact, and we really do appreciate it. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.